Your Excellencies, dear participants, it is a great pleasure for me to open this event and welcome you to the premises of the University of Helsinki. As we are here, I think this is really the right place for such a seminar. University is the main function or main value of the university is to seek for the truth. And what is a better place than the university to go for the truth and together with freedom of speech, which has to come with responsibility. And I think this is the venue right for this type of seminar and topic. Also, the topic is very relevant, I think, for the democracy of the society, and also the universities are key in key role in promoting the democratic processes and the democratic society. As I reflect to my youth, say when I was 20 years old, I considered more or less all the media relatively trustworthy. Of course, there is always variability how much you can trust media. But in a big picture, all the main media, at least in our country, was more or less trustworthy. You didn't have much reason to doubt the news you were reading in a newspaper or getting through the media elsewhere. Nowadays, the time of the social media has changed the picture very much. So if you look at the social media, my children are active in TikTok. If you look at the information from TikTok, I think you get a completely different picture than if you look at the traditional media. I think still the traditional media is, at least in this country, mostly trustworthy source of information, while the social media may be or may not be, depending what you are looking there. Somebody like myself, if I go to social media, I know that I have to be critical what I see there. And I'm following the traditional media and the social media, and I know the difference. And I know that if there is something strange in the social media, I can always go to a traditional media and try to find the reliable sources. But I'm more worried about young people of the age of my children or young generation who don't use the traditional media at all. If you only get the information from the sources of TikTok, you get all kind of conspiratory theories, which you may believe because you don't have any other source of information. So this is my great worry, and I think, well, this is maybe a side story of if we consider the media as a whole. But still, I think this is a very big question of what is the future, what is the role of media, and what is the role of truth through the media as we understand it. I'm very happy to host this event here. I'm thankful for the organizers of the event to bring it to Finland, to bring it to the University of Helsinki. And I wish you a very successful and fruitful sessions and days in Helsinki. And you are mostly welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, huomenta. Dear Kaarle, dear Sandra, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, dear audience. It is my great pleasure to participate today and to give a start to an extremely topical discussion. And I thank Institut Français, University of Helsinki, Embassy of France, all the partners for choosing this particular topic for today's event, as this is one of the milestones of our survival as democracies: truth, true information, media literacy. I'm glad to see many panelists and impressive interest to this topic. It is very symbolic that we talk about information and media in the face of war in the capital of the country, well known for the high level of media literacy, and which has media literacy as the part of the Finnish national security model. As President Stubb rightly emphasized this, comprehensive security model, because really, without media, security cannot be full in our times. It is critically important to see this phenomena in complex. One of the key reasons why Russia has started its imperialistic conquest is the feeling that the West is weak. Russia has relied on the low level of societal resilience and awareness. That is why, from the outset of Russia's invasion in 2014, disinformation has been a key tactic in Russia's broader strategy. The aim is clear: to distort reality, manipulate public opinion, and weaken international support for Ukraine. This disinformation campaign operates on multiple levels: within Russia, to control its own domestic population; in Ukraine, to sow confusion and panic; and globally, to undermine the credibility of Ukraine and its allies. False narratives about the causes of war, fabricated reports about Ukrainian aggression, and even staged atrocities have been strategically employed to confuse audiences and create doubt. Russia's government-controlled media, social media bots, and even hackers have worked in concert to spread these falsehoods. The rapid viral spread of misinformation through these networks made it difficult to counteract in the real time. Russia has invested heavily in disinformation factories, so-called troll farms that pump out misleading content across the internet. These tactics are designed to divide and polarize the international community, destabilizing efforts to present a unified response against Russian aggression. These methods are widely applied to influence elections in the democratic countries and seed distrust and chaos in the democratic societies. One of the most dangerous aspects of this digital warfare is the use of deepfakes and AI-generated content, which can make it nearly impossible to distinguish truth from fiction. In this context, Ukraine has worked tirelessly to counter massive disinformation, with a strategy centered on transparency, truth-telling, and resilience. We have engaged everyone, including government, private sector, academia, expert networks, influencers in TikTok, and other social media. Literally, the whole society, everyone, ordinary Ukrainians, stood up to counter Russia's lies. Ukrainian officials, including President Zelensky, have embraced social media, delivering powerful, unfiltered messages directly to the global audience. These efforts have been vital in rallying international support and ensuring that Ukraine's story is heard amid the noise of Russia's disinformation. Ukraine's, as we call it, IT army, a group of cyber experts and volunteers, has also played a key role disrupting Russian disinformation networks and exposing lies in real time. The Ukrainian government has also been proactive and partnering with tech companies, urging platforms like Meta, YouTube, and Twitter to remove fake accounts and limit the reach of Russian propaganda. But the fight against disinformation cannot be won by Ukraine alone. It requires a global coalition of governments, tech companies, and civil society. Nations have stepped up by imposing sanctions on Russian media outlets, restricting their broadcasting and deplatforming state-sponsored disinformation channels. Fact-checking organizations have also intensified their efforts to debunk false claims in real time, playing a crucial role in limiting the damage caused by disinformation. We commend efforts by the European Union implementing robust policies to combat Russian disinformation, including setting up East Stratcom Task Force, which monitors and counters fake news originating from Russian sources. Meanwhile, NATO has enhanced its strategic communications to protect allied countries from becoming victims of disinformation. Despite these efforts, challenges remain. Information overload, the complexity of digital platforms, and the sheer volume of disinformation makes it difficult to reach every audience effectively. As disinformation evolves, so must our tactics. This means strengthening media literacy, ensuring that populations can critically assess the information they consume, and pushing for more transparency from tech giants regarding how they managed content on their platforms. The fight against disinformation in Russia's war against Ukraine is not just about controlling the narrative. It's about defending the truth and safeguarding democratic values. Information warfare is a threat to global security, and we must remain vigilant in exposing lies and supporting those who speak the truth, even in the face of great adversity. Together, we can counter the falsehoods and propaganda that seek to undermine our collective resolve. Truth is our greatest weapon, and we must wield it wisely in this ongoing battle. And one simple truth we need to remember always: Russia's war against Ukraine has never been about any real security threat coming either from Ukraine or from NATO or from any other source or any other country. This war is about President Putin and his gang fearing something much more powerful than any physical weapon on earth, and it is democracy. If people in Ukraine can have democratic rights, real democratic rights, then people in Russia will soon crave them too. That was what this war is really about. Also, it's about the right of Ukrainians to exist physically and to be an independent nation. So, lives of 38 million Ukrainians are at stake as we have a purely genocidal war in the heart of Europe now. Please always remember about this, and we ask you to share the truth with your audiences, to stand with us in safeguarding and spreading the truth. With that, I wish you a very fruitful discussion and great interactions today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, and Your Excellencies, Professor Kaarle Hämeri, and Excellency Olga Dibrova, thank you so much for your opening remarks. On behalf of the French Embassy, I would like to warmly welcome you. Ambassador Dibrova has delivered a powerful and substantial message, and I think it's kicking up the tone for today. So I'm the last speaker, separating you from in-depth discussion, so I will be short. I hope so. So today's conference, European Dialogue in Helsinki, Information and the Media in the Face of War. It's part of a series that has already started in many different capitals in Europe, thanks to the Institut Français. So it happened already in Prague, Vilnius, Warsaw, Amsterdam, Sofia, each with a slightly different theme. And so why has this project arisen? I should ask the Institut Français. The origin of this project was a very simple observation. The Russian war of aggression in Ukraine was, of course, a shock. And it has many impacts on Europe, of course, on rule of law, democracy, human rights, etc. And the question was, what is Europe after all? What brings us together? What is the difference from other countries of other regional grouping? And so the idea starts, and many different discussions have taken place all through Europe. And for Helsinki, the decision was made to tackle the topic of disinformation and media and information in the war. Why? Well, for obvious reason, as Ambassador Dibrova has stated, media literacy, Finland's strength in the disinformation fight. And for France, it's also a very important topic. You may know or may not know that France has been particularly targeted by hostile information maneuvers from Russia. Russian ambitions in Africa, as well as French support for Ukraine, have generated a growing volume of Russian information attacks. And these attacks have had concrete impact on our diplomacy. Even on our officers abroad, they have been victims of attack after a disinformation campaign. So it's a very important topic for France. We have made it a very important foreign diplomacy priority. We have also strengthened our means of monitoring and analyzing disinformation, and our very good speakers today will explain what France is doing and how we are doing and what challenges we are encountering. But it would be like, for instance, creating an open source investigation service like Viginum. It was also strengthening the monitoring alert in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in the Ministry of Armed Forces. So these new actors in France, they are working daily to detect and respond to information threats. So you will learn a lot about these. I hope you will have very fruitful discussion, and I really would like to thank all our partners in Finland, the University of Helsinki. Thank you so much for your welcome hosting this session. The Goethe Institute. We always have a special relation with the Goethe Institute. The French-German relation is strong. In France, I would like to thank, of course, the French Institute Paris and the supporters of the European Dialogue series, the newspaper West France, Arte, Le Grand Continent, Cometa, Reporters Without Borders, Sciences Po Rennes, Reims University, and Paris 8 University. Thank you, and have a fruitful discussion.
So welcome, everybody. It's an honor to be here and to be able to talk about democracy, journalism, and propaganda with our great panelists. So we will focus on disinformation, how information is used more and more often as a propaganda tool in the context of conflicts, and also to polarize public debate. At the same time, as we heard, we witnessed non-professional media channels multiplying, participating in the dissemination of unverified news. So disinformation, which is oriented to serve the interests of state or private actors. So what kind of awareness do European citizens have of this manipulation, and can the resilience of societies and media education create a vaccine against disinformation? So welcome, panelists, and I suggest we first do a quick tour de table so you can present yourselves quickly.
Thank you, Annastiina, and welcome everybody. My name is Heikki Aittokoski. I'm a Finnish journalist working for the newspaper Helsingin Sanomat, a long-time foreign news reporter.
Thank you. My name is Mikko Salo. I'm a founder to Faktabaari, and I'm also leading our team's efforts on tackling disinformation and more like information disorders. It's a bit wider problem, unfortunately, than disinformation. We have mostly focused on elections and are working mostly on digital information literacy, exactly this kind of inoculation part.
Hello, I'm Eeva Luhtakallio. I'm a professor of sociology here at the University of Helsinki. I'm specialized in political sociology and have recently conducted research especially on visual politics and how the abundant use of images and visuality changes also the media landscape, but more at large the entire public sphere, which I assume is the reason why I'm at this panel today.
Hello, my name is Fabrice Puchault. I'm the head of Society and Culture Department in Arte. It means that our department deals with geopolitics, history, investigation, and I'm also running the 3 daily magazines about geopolitics, international politics, and images. And in fact, I'm a man of images. I'm not a journalist.
Hello, my name is David Collomb. I teach history at Sciences Po in Paris, and I wrote a few books about propaganda and information warfare. And now I try to tackle this and misinformation with the OECD and with RSF, Reporters Without Frontiers.
Yeah, you can keep it. Yeah.
I keep it.
Yeah, you can keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually David Collomb has prepared us a short introduction on the matter of disinformation. Maybe we can start with that and then have reactions to the matter from other panelists.
Thank you. I don't know why, but historians often talk first. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I would say first that the Davos Forum in January identified mis and disinformation as the risk number 1 for all organizations over the next 2 years. And it's linked to the information warfare that we face since the end of the Cold War, and more specifically, the fact that since 2022, the Kremlin has doubled its war of aggression against Ukraine with an unprecedented intensification of its information war against all countries that do support Ukraine and the Ukrainians. And in France, it was said, we now have Viginum, our vigilance and protection service against foreign digital interferences. And Viginum has identified a series of dis and misinformation networks run by the Kremlin, like Doppelganger, Portal Combat, a series of operations against France, against our cohesion. And our diplomacy has stated in February, I quote, "The recurrence of the operations carried out in recent months and their direct link with statements made by Russian authorities clearly demonstrate that this is a coordinated strategy of information warfare led and supported by Moscow." And this information strategy involves a lot of actors, both state actors and non-state actors. We know also that since decades, almost century, it relies on what Russian strategists call operational art. It's a kind of multi-dimension strategy that involves a lot of stakeholders in the informational sphere, strategic communication from the Kremlin, public diplomacy, international media, troll farms, intelligence services, agents of influence, and we call it usually hybrid warfare because often they use asymmetric tactics to seek out and exploit the opponent's weaknesses by non-military means, politic, economic, informational, also the weaponization of migration, for example, supported by the threat of conventional military use and the use of unconventional means. We experienced that in France, in Germany, also here in Finland. Every country that supports Ukraine experiences this kind of hybrid tactics. And we know that waves of false and misleading content can undermine social cohesion. It can cast doubt on factual information and undermine trust in public institutions. I will quote the OECD survey on drivers of trust in public institutions. We have two separate ways, Finland and France. Finland is high, very high in this ranking, but the trust is declining since 21. France is very low in this ranking, very, very low, amongst the worst countries of the OECD according to trust in our own government. But since 21, France progresses. So we have a lot to learn one from another, how to maintain trust in Finland, how to gain more trust in France and several other countries. I would say a few words about the challenge of generative AI, because now we have facts about this challenge. According to a recent report from Google, we know that AI misuses tend to focus on the information tactics. It's not only deepfakes and impersonation, it's not only fraud, but also the scaling of the operations. It's also the amplification, automated amplification, targeting, personalization, and it changes completely the game. We know from NewsGuard that in some countries, the number of fake news sites exceed the number of authentic news sites. This is the case in the US since June 24. We know that the number of fake news sites generated by AI has been multiplied by 22 since May 23. We know also that this evolution is driven by big companies' money through what we call programmatic advertising. The use of AI to place ads where they will get the more impression, the more engagement. And 67% of big companies finance, without unknowingly, dis and misinformation. It represents, according to NewsGuard, $2.6 billion each year that ends up in the pockets of dis and misinformators and often agents from the Kremlin. We know that journalists are specifically targeted by Russian operations, like the Operation Overload. We know that everywhere in the free societies, journalists are targeted by harassment, trolling online. I read the book of Jessica Arrow, Putin Trolls. You probably know the story of Jessica Arrow. I read the book of Mariana Spring from the BBC, Among the Trolls, where she described her courageous decision to go face-to-face with those who were calling for her to be raped and killed, and not anonymous trolls, people calling for her rape and her killing by their own names. I read also this summer the incredible book from René Diresta, the former head of research from the Stanford Internet Observatory, who was targeted by Elon Musk himself. And they lost all their money, all their credibility. And it's a problem we face, especially since the Kremlin has created new networks of dis and misinformation relying on generative AI. It's the case of what we call copycop, or the Dugan network. This network uses generative AI to plagiarize, translate, edit content from mainstream media outlets. They distribute fake content, deep fakes. And the problem is that the scale of those operations produces indirect bad effects on Google top search results, for example, but also on the chatbots. According to NewsGuard, every 30% of the requests on chatbots generated by AI give credibility automatically to Russian content. And you said earlier that for most of us, TikTok is a real concern. It has been defined by our own chief of staff of the military in France as an informational weapon. What can we do about it? A lot has been done at the global level that was mentioned earlier. Let me say to finish that France took the initiative of the Information and Democracy Partnership a few years ago. France and Finland signed in September the Information Integrity Online Declaration, signed by 34 countries. Finland, France, and a lot of other countries signed the US framework to counter foreign state information manipulation, FIMI. France and the US conducted the work of the OECD and the publication of the very important report called Facts, Not Fakes, tackling disinformation, strengthening information integrity in March 24. And what can we learn from those global international initiatives? We can learn that our best defense is at the same time what renders us fragile. We are free countries. We value other points of view. And we value contradiction. We value freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of information. And that's what is exploited. And too often, we react to dis and misinformation by reducing our freedom of information, like we did in France, like many countries did with laws against some of our own values. We have to consider our values not as flaws, but as a real asset in this global information war between authoritarian regimes and democratic regimes. We have to consider transparency as a great asset. In France, we adopted in July a kind of FARA law, Foreign Agents Registration Act, like the US did in 1938, like the United Kingdom did last year, like Australia did, and transparency is a very powerful tool. But we have a lot to learn from what has been done in Finland to render ourselves more resilient. Because in my view, in my very French view, you are the most resilient country on earth. And I'm here to understand what makes you so resilient and what can help us becoming as resilient as you. And there is, of course, in education to the media literacy in Finland, which is a world reference. There is also the specific place of your media, your journalists, and the way people access to information. But also I know that you consider the new techniques that have been developed, techniques of boosting like pre-bunking, critical thinking, media literacy, nudging, accuracy primes, debunking. And a big question now is how to render our societies more resilient. I'm sorry to be so long. I did not keep my promise. I'm French. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, David Colon. I actually forgot to introduce myself. I'm Annastiina Heikkilä, journal and author, and I worked as the correspondent for the Finnish broadcasting company Yle in Paris for over 10 years, so I'm familiar with the media and also disinformation, trust issues in France and in Finland. But yes, I would like to hear short reactions, comments of other panelists to these strong words by David Colon. Yes, you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, as a patriotic Finn, I was very happy to hear that we are a resilient nation. As a journalist, I take it with a pinch of salt, however. We do have our problems. I'm a former student of this very university. I learned valuable lessons in this campus, and I would like to return the favor. I'm a failed student, but a student, however. And I studied political history, and I just to set up the context. As a journalist, I very much like to try and always, when possible, take a step back and look at the big picture and the context. And that's why it's important to remember that when we're talking about disinformation, we're not talking about a new phenomenon. It's been around for always. I remember as a student reading the famous Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu, who was saying something like, if the enemy thinks you are going west, go east. And this kind of stuff, and this is several thousand years ago. And then we have in political history, we have every time in wartime, like one of the most famous examples, First World War, there was lots of propaganda about Germans crucifying babies in Belgium. No facts behind that. Might have happened, but probably not. Then, yeah, in Finland, we are, of course, very much aware of the Mainila incident, Eastern border, Stalin, Soviet Union. They were claiming that Finland actually started the hostilities, which obviously was baloney. And there's millions and millions of these kinds of examples. but what in today's world as a journalist, or in my 30-year perspective as a journalist, strikes me is, first of all, the scale of disinformation. There's the huge amounts of it everywhere. You run into it all the time, at least in my job. And secondly, of course, the tools, internet, social media, etc. And then one more thing that has, in my view, has changed is that when disinformation used to be a weapon of wartime mostly, now we have it in peacetime as well. You only have to look at the United States, and you start thinking like with friends like these, etc. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps like we're starting with a fact-checking organization as we started 2014 for fact-based public debate. That, by the way, still is our motto and has lasted time. Whereas, I mean, things are getting more and more complex, and Finland is not immune to any of these problems neither. What we are pretty good is like when it comes to Russian disinformation, but that's possibly like a historical and psychological reasons for that one, and that has been discussed evidently, and that we can somehow be proud of, and we are also learning much more, I suppose, day by day from Ukrainians who have really faced like a real information operations. I'm afraid we haven't really been really tested, and this is partially because I think it's much more, let's say, it pays off more to test, for example, the French system at the moment. I think it's a ruthless war, hit where it hits hardest and all that. But we have put our focus more like, what is information war, then it's a state, then it's a war, then we really count on the pretty much the officials, and this is, of course, a very serious thing. But what we are worried is, especially next to that, the digital power that allows or amplifies these messages, and kind of badly used is actually a tool in everybody's hands, a very dangerous one. But we know that also the Russians have been using that one to the extent. Still on the Russian, I have to say that in Finland we have get to the point that we even start to create a little bit too much stories about the Russians. Unfortunately, we had to kind of fact check also Jesse Karo's new book's claim that was going a little bit too far with his hypothesis. Jonas is here, who made a very good investigative story, and then our Polish colleagues actually repeated it. It's just that what we were kind of waiting for, just a new revelation how evil the Putin is. I mean, he is evil, no doubt about that one, but he's not able to do everything, and we have to be careful on that one, not to lose our senses on that one. So there are many phenomena on that one. But what instead we have tried then on the literacy thing, we have some strengths and some institutions like our school systems and some of our curricula that has addressed it from very early age. That is super important. I mean, by the time that you get your first smartphone, I think actually you shouldn't get your smartphone too early with this context. That's another debate that is now ongoing in Finland, very wisely. But so to really address the challenges coming from this amplified marketing platforms, that's what they are. We have to call them what they are. They are no medias, they are marketing platforms, and they amplify whatever message. And in the European scale, we can be very proud of ourselves that we have put like some sort of limits to this one, because we just had actually engaged with our US counterparts last week and a debate, and they are very worried what is happening there, because it's a completely free world there. And I mean, then it's not anymore talking about fact-checking, it's more like a reality checking, and people starting to live in their own bubbles, but also outside the bubbles, and this is something that we really have to prevent. Luckily, I think, in the European level, we are like at least on the right step of that one. And actually, it's for Finns, it's actually quite interesting. There is a shift making. There is a French commissioner kind of stepped down, and then the Finnish commissioner who is supposed to lead these efforts stepping in. So please, let's keep her accountable for her actions as well for the future. So the digital power is super important to address, and I think this is something that we should also make more voice, because, for example, in the case of Ukraine, I mean, they have to take the help everywhere they can. We have seen the tides change, for example, with the X that was kind of helping Ukraine in the beginning, now is allowing completely ridiculous things happening in Ukraine, and so the weaponizations of the platforms is a big challenge, and the dynamics of it. So we have to understand that these are marketing platforms, and that's where our digital information literacy somehow kind of stems from in the beginning. But perhaps I leave it for here for the time being, and let's continue later.
Okay, thank you. I very much agree with and of course share the multiple concerns that the current situation raises, and these kind of very concerned addresses are very common in these discussions. I wanted to bring in maybe an approach from recent research that I've conducted, mainly thinking about the need to understand and take into account the profound transformation and changes that the entire sort of public sphere itself is experiencing and can be observed. Of course, there is the multiplication of channels, both fake and real, through which people receive news and so on. But the social media, and in particular the way it has visualized the contents of the public sphere, I think is something that cannot be overlooked in this debate. So in my recent study, we studied youth politics, young people's engagement in all kinds of forms of politics, not just party politics, but activism and pretty personalized approaches to politics. This was done in 4 European countries, including France and Finland. We studied the practices they themselves had to politicize visually, that they used in abundance in multiple channels and also with multiple very different messages. But then also we studied the content, the massive amount of visual arguments that result from these very mundane practices of taking selfies that can be turned into politics and so on, just to give one example. So visual arguments and politics done with and through them can change and do change the rules of the game, so that the kind of concerned addresses for real or fake news and so on and so forth kind of sometimes seem not outdated, but part of a different discussion altogether, because if you have an argument that is purely visual, which we do have more and more, think about, for instance, the memes created by pairing two images. Say we had a meme, a very popular meme also in Finland about where Emmanuel Macron was sitting next to Queen Victoria, and then paired with an image of French truckers having a demonstration near Paris. And so this kind of image pair doesn't really need any words, because it's irreproachable. Everybody sees what is in it. The only problem is that you can see many things in it. You can interpret it in many different ways. So visual arguments are both uncontradictable and irreproachable in a way, and very hazy in another way, so that you can come up with multiple interpretations from them, and then also create further interpretations and create further politics, so to say, through layering different kinds of messages. And in a project where we studied an abundance of this kind of cases, we kind of concluded that this results in something that we can call fame democracy, which is a public sphere entirely driven by fame and visibility, struggle over visibility and authenticity that we can see now, of course, also in the business of fake news and so on, instead of arguments and content in themselves and in itself, and the groundedness of such things. So in addition, but I just wanted to kind of add to this point that in addition to the very obvious challenges to democracy and to the stability and resilience of our societies and so forth, and to professional journalism, of course, these features, these quite new features, also have potential to democracy, and they also do enhance literacy to some formats, to sensitivity to images, and kind of also give room to not only bad-minded fake news producers, but also to activists, say climate activists, and also to mundane, everyday people's experiences and proofs of what's going on, for instance. So that would be my little additional approach to this debate.
Well, I'm not a journalist, I've said, and I will try to add something which is a specific approach. I am coming from the cinema side. I study cinema, I do films, I did films, so I'm here the only images maker. So from this point of view, we are producing and manufacturing images all day long, hours and hours and hours. So what I want to add is maybe there is something that we have to target. It's something very common, the belief in images. Images are the support, the most important support of information now. That you know that the first broadcaster in the United States is not Netflix, it's not Disney. They are far beyond YouTube. So, and it's growing in England. It will be the same in Europe in the next years. So images, and we believe in images. As we believed in icon, but God is not there. And reality is not in images. That's something that cinema learned you, or photography, or the study of photography. So what can we do in a world of images? So we decided in Arte, I'm French, I'm living in Paris, but working for a European channel, and it's not just a word. It means that we are working on a daily basis with people from Belgium, from Germany. Wiley also is one of our partner, institutional partner. So we try to be European, meaning also sharing different view. Europe as a cosmopolitan utopia, in a way. But going back to the fact, so we built, and it's Access Prime Time on our channel, a daily Access Prime Time show, which is called Behind the Images. It's strictly the title. You can see it if you want, because Arte is also in English. So you go to the arte.english website, and then you can find Behind the Images. And Behind the Images is, in fact, the manufacturing. We take one picture, which was enormous on the web, whatever the source is. And then we try to say, okay, it was built that way. It was manufactured that way. And it's not only the making of the image, which is interrogated by the story, but it's also the aesthetic of it, because aesthetic means obviously something. The perspective, is it dark, is it glowing, and so on and so on and so on. It's not to say that everything is manufactured, but it's exactly that. It could go from Trump pictures made with AI by Trump supporters, which is a very interesting fact. They are using AI with Trump in it. And, but it could be also Trump, it just could be also war zone in Ukraine, it could be pop culture, it could be everything, or selfies, for instance. and we try to deconstruct. And in the same time we deconstruct, we try to boost, to make boosting, as you say. We love the idea of being pre-bunker, but we are not, as I've been told this morning. But trying not, it's not to educate, it's a story. Because we are storytellers with images. Nobody watch a TV channel or mass media or whatever to learn something. We watch it for other reasons, obviously. So we tell stories. And so we try just to be, in fact, to be transparent, because we are also interrogating our own images when we made bad things or errors. But it's also to use another word, accountability. We owe our viewers, whatever the vector is, accountability. And accountability and transparency could be in the storytelling. They are part of the storytelling. We have another show which is called Behind the Maps. It's the same thing. We look at all the situation, the conflicts in the world, or even trades, or the sea laws and so on, with maps, only maps. So we zoom, and we go very high, and we try to tell a story, to look at a situation from very different angles. Then we add a new magazine, which is called, and we go really to the point, Sources. And Sources is an open, is an OSINT investigation. The Guardian is doing it, Le Monde is doing it, the New York Times is doing it, but I think we are the only channel to have a regular show which is made with OSINT. OSINT means open source investigation. For instance, I give you an example. We found a lot of pictures of kids adopted by generous Russian in Russia because their parents were dead, killed in Mariupol, in Donbass, and so on. And with this tool, we were able to debunk that. In fact, because we found through social networks, through satellite images, and so on, we can describe all their way, being kidnapped by the Russians in Mariupol to Vladivostok. And we found their parents, they are still alive, and so on and so on. And in that way, well, we helped the Ukrainian side to know exactly where they were. But with OSINT, with the use of these tools, we can also tell the story, because it's part of the show itself. We say to the viewer, what is the method? What is the source? Where does it coming from? All the time, and it's possible. And now on our primetime show, Investigative Docs, we do that also. We always tell the methods, all the time. For instance, we are quite proud. We received the Emmy Award for the best investigation about a program about Pegasus, which is also something big, Pegasus. And this show was also showing the way the journalist made the inquiry. So it's accountability. We say to our viewer what we do all the time. And to come back, there's something. And thank you for what you said about regulations, because there is no vaccine without regulations. And the choice that the United States have made to let them free, I mean the big tech, because all of that would not be possible without the economic model of the big tech. The economic model is a financial economic model. Everything for the profit. No, absolutely no limit to that. And of course, we are all producers of content, images and so on, in fact, in their ecosystem. We need X. We need X. It's awful, because they are not transparent, no accountability at all, never, and I'm talking about Google. You said that the results of this amazing development of of bots and so on, and information sites is enormous, and it goes on the hierarchy of Google on the first results. But I'm sorry, it's also Google's responsibility and accountability. we are a bit trapped without regulation. Thank you. That's what I wanted to add. But don't trust images. Images don't work anymore. This is the words of a Ukrainian artist who was exposed at the Biennale in Venice last year. Images don't work anymore.
Thank you, Fabrice. Yeah, speaking of the fabrication and war, Europe and the US elections that are in a couple of weeks, presidential candidate Donald Trump has used disinformation and conspiracy theories in his vaunts. And as a result, like we heard, corrosive conspiracy theories have moved to the heart of political debate, normalizing extremist rhetoric in the US. And it also seems that the lines between domestic and foreign attempts to undermine democracy have become increasingly blurred in the US. We already touched this subject in a way, but I would like to hear short comments about the situation in the US and how would you analyze the importance of the US elections for the political culture here in Europe, and what lessons can we learn from this, speaking of disinformation of the US elections and the resilience of societies here. Maybe Mikko, Salo could start, because you have been meeting with colleagues there in the US.
Yeah, okay, so I kind of touched it already. So the worry was that these are like people who are misinformation, disinformation researchers, and they are trying to observe. First of all, they don't get the big picture. They don't know what is happening there. So they just immediately they have even less data to themselves that we do in Europe, because we have at least like push the platforms for some sort of timid trials and all that. So it's kind of blank. So then we know in US, what to me, I was able to follow the 22 elections in US on spot, actually invited by the State Department. And we were visiting Washington, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, and the number of the amount of the spinning and the amount of money involved in that politics. There is no figures on that one. That is pretty worrying as well. But with some researchers, we counted that it might be closer to 100 times more than per person than in Finland. So I really put in capital. So with that amount of, let's say, creativity that can be both and without no hindrance at the moment on the last couple of weeks, when everything can be counted in a couple of thousands of votes. So that's a very scary combination. And yes, then my point, what I said earlier, was that just the mis and disinformation, yes, that's one thing. Immediately they asked us to focus on observing the voter oppression. So practically like, now it's like who is going to vote? So I mean, of course, everybody tries to get their own voters on board and tries to let the other ones to sleep, so that there would be as few as possible on that side. So it's a pretty ruthless fight, and most of it, especially when it comes to the young audiences, that is taking place, of course, online, because that's where the young people are. And so this is the thing, and that's why they ended up to like sharing us an article that was pretty much like challenging the whole, like, are we living in the same, yes, virtual bubbles? Yes, no, we are not, definitely. But that has kind of stemmed there to like living in communities that might be pushed against each other. So the consequences of that one, as we know that we are still so many times dependent on the US, that the next 3 months is going to be like a kind of in between. Whoever wins, I mean, everybody, they say that we don't know who won, so to say. I mean, it will be contested probably So it's not over 2 weeks. And so something like that continues, and of course this creates then the big risks for us all, that people are hopefully, and I know also preparing, so it's not like nobody's doing anything. But I mean, I think our conclusions in Europe is that we have to prepare for the worst, so to say. Yeah.
Okay, just maybe a quick comment on this, US politics really not being my area of expertise as such, but I think what was interesting already the last time Trump won and is equally interesting now, and it kind of goes to the direction of praising regulations and praising also the level of literacy and maybe also level of still existing national media channels in the European context, that I think it's much easier to sort of have a big picture here than in the US. And so I think I have two approaches to this. I landed in New York 2 weeks after the first Trump election as a visitor at the New York University Sociology Department, one of the best sociology departments on the globe, one could say. And it was a community in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder and total shock, because nobody there had predicted that Trump actually could win. Whereas I think in my circles and also among young people creating memes and whatnot already then in the Finnish context, everybody knew this was going to go like that. Like, this was no surprise. I don't know many people who were really, really shocked or surprised that it went this way. And I think it's the same now. We have a more realistic approach to what's going on, because we are looking at it from afar, but also because we have better access to multiple media sources, perhaps. I don't know if we can do much in favor of the poor Americans in this sense, but maybe just to say that yes, it's concerning and it's kind of terrifying in many ways, but it's still not the only elections in this world that matter. So in some ways, I also think the importance of the US elections is overemphasized a little bit. We have a war going on in Europe. We have a crazy situation in Israel, Palestine, and so on and so forth. And of course, this affects all of these as well, but still.
Yes. I just want to add something about what you say about, yes, we know we live in bubbles and so on. That was the first step. And then you said, but it's more than this. We live in fiction. I remember, and it rings something in my memory. You know what Anna Arendt said when she was talking about culture? One who does not make the difference between fiction and fact is the ideal subject of totalitarianism. So I don't think we emphasize too much on the American election. The issue is totalitarianism. And I think it's the same in Europe. And I think that there are extremely powerful forces that goes on the same way. Well, that's a political note. You're not obliged to take it. But I'm financing a lot of documentaries. Documentary is a special sport. It has a very special connection with time. We never react. Never. We never go fast. Never. We slow down everything on purpose. It takes minimum to make good investigative docs, to make a good social story, wherever it is. It takes years. Minimum. Wiley is excellent at this sport. I had a very good, one of my best friends is Ika Vekalati, that maybe you know, who was the head of documentary in the past here, and so on. And well, this excellency is a sport of slowing down. And what we observed, we made a huge film which will not be broadcast which will be broadcast the 6th of January on purpose. It's shot in Elizabethtown in Pennsylvania, 8 months inside the the Christian nationalist groups who are heavily supporting, it's 30% of the American voters. It's declared like that, maybe not exactly, but well, it's among that. They really believe that they are going to be, they go to the mass with AR-15. They have a group which is heavily armed, and AR-15 are the only one they showed us, because we gain their trust. It's long sequences and so on. They have worse than AR-15. There are 10 of them protecting the mass against Al-Qaeda. I'm not joking. This is what the preachers say, this is what they say, and they are not extremists. They are Christian nationalists. It's a political movement in the state. They are living in this world where Al-Qaeda or the Antifa, as they say, or the crazy, you know, the people who Trump talked about 2 weeks ago, we will send the army against them. They are really believing that they are under attack. There are real bullets in their AR-15. So it's not bubbles anymore. They are totally contaminated by something that does not exist at all. Yeah. So my other takeaway, we react too much when we are in media. We go fast, too fast. Gaza is a blind spot. Well, it is true that it seems that IDF is targeting journalists. 137, 160, and 130 has been killed. These are not accidents at all. So it's a blind spot. But with the tool of documentary, for my news department, they react, they have no picture, they don't know, well, how to handle it. But when it comes to documentary, we are in fact filming for 1 year there. And then we will have something. So the discipline of images is also a discipline of time.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's this pressure to act very quickly and a growing.
As soon as we react, we are in danger. We put our viewers and ourselves in danger.
And a growing distrust towards traditional media in France and in Finland. How do you comment?
Yes, I would like to say just a few words to say that from the Kremlin's point of view, the US elections are a top priority because this kind of election is the main battlefield from the war in Ukraine. They can win the war in Ukraine on November 5th, and they have invested a lot of resources. Human resources, economic resources, and we in the European countries, we often face reduction of our budgets. Budgets are shrinking, our influence budget. Do you know what kind of evolution is planned by the Kremlin for the year 25? An increase of 13% of its state media's budget. I'm sure, I don't know the budget, but I'm sure that it will not increase by this kind of number. Yes?
For us, it's something like 7% of our budget less.
And it's good.
And it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Compared to France Television, it's good.
Compared to everybody in France, it's good. Shrinking by 7%. So, what we have to learn from what's happening in the state is that the Kremlin has created alternative realities, what they call amplified realities, additional realities. One American in four believes that its government is directed by Satanists. One American in four believes that the use of violence is legitimate during an election, and American beliefs are very, 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 very frightening for rational people like you and me. And what we have to learn from this experience is that we have to invest like Finland does in its media. I know that you spent a lot more money from your pocket to buy a magazine, to buy access to information, quality information, and we have to invest more. If our states have not the money to do that, civil society has to do that. We have to invest in trustworthy information in order to protect ourselves from those alternate realities, additional realities, amplified realities from the Kremlin, boosted by generative AI. And not in 25. We have to do it now because those alternate realities are becoming very, very, very strong in the informational sphere.
Monsieur Aittokoski, how in Helsingin Sanomat, as a journalist here in Finland, we were talking about the that there is more and more distrust towards the so-called traditional media. How do you see this situation in Finland and in Europe at the moment, and how could we fight against it and better counter pro-Russian misinformation, for example?
The only thing that we can do at a traditional news outlet like Helsingin Sanomat is to keep on trying to produce good quality journalism as much as possible. I don't mean as much as possible quantity-wise, I mean as good journalism as possible. What I would expect from the Finnish society, and I emphasize I do not mean only the government, I mean the society, the schools. I would like to see even more education on how to get and assess information. I know that a lot of it is already done in Finnish schools, but even more would be a good idea. But then families, parents also bear a responsibility to teach their children how to see information, differ information from disinformation. And that's about everything we can do. But I want to emphasize that I don't see this as a lost battle. In my opinion, the majority, maybe even the vast majority of Finnish people do know what is reliable and what is not. What I'm worried about more is the Russian society. I remember very much worried. We see the catastrophic consequences. I remember 10 years ago I was writing a non-fiction book called The Dance of Death, Kuolemantanssi in Finnish, which was about the rise of nationalism in Europe. And I spent time in Moscow, and I was talking to just ordinary Russian people. And then this one young man says that he would like to see Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia being part of Russia. And I was like asking him, so what if they disagree, the people in these countries? And he says, why would they disagree? Who wants to live in a small country when you can be a part of Russia? And then I started, that was already after Crimea, but that's like, I remember it struck me really strongly that somebody really has a mindset like this, and I realized this obviously has to come from somewhere, and it comes from sort of like Russia One TV channel, etc., etc. And I understood that if you just keep on feeding disinformation day in, day out from basically all legitimate sources, this is what you get.
Yes, okay, so just to maybe comment on that, and then also the question of, I can't not say that our current government is cutting the YLE funding, for instance, in radical ways. So I would like to also kind of just bring us back to the Finnish reality and say this is not the most resilient country in the world, or the place where politics is wonderful and where media is well funded and so on and so forth. So let's just be real with this. There's critical tendencies in all European countries, especially the threat of the far right, and it's difficult and bizarre, often bizarre links with Russia, for instance. But I wanted to add to what Heikki was saying, that I think that what has been also kind of easily forgotten in the current situation is that there is such a thing as a very fragile and vague, but still there is a thing called Russian opposition. And we've completely let them down. We've let I have lots of Russian researcher colleagues who are trying to mobilize in Europe these tiny, weak signs of bringing some kind of alternative voice to it. And it seems hopeless. And I think it indeed will be hopeless as long as we've completely given up on them saying, okay, so they wage war, we can't do anything with anybody there. And yes, of course, I also haven't, gone to Moscow since 22, nobody has. But I think that's like what you're saying about your research back then would be important to keep up somehow, so that we're not going to get rid of that country either. So that's a kind of another sort of reality aspect to this debate.
Thank you. Our time is soon running out, so sort of to sum this up, I would like everybody please to name if you have 1 minute, to name a vaccine against disinformation, something concrete we could take out of this discussion and bring into our daily work and life. So who wants to start?
Vaccine exists. It's called pre-bunking, and it's a quite old technique which has been renewed by social psychologist teams at the University of Cambridge with Professor Sandra van der Linden, who published a really great book I recommend called Foolproof: Why We Fall for Misinformation and How to Build Immunity. And it's a technique for combating information manipulation involving creating, I quote, mental antibodies, end quote, by helping the public to identify the kind of technique that the Kremlin's propaganda strategists use to manipulate information. And if you want to try, this team of social psychologists has created a few serious games online. I will quote 2 of them. Go Viral, created with WHO. It's a 5-minute game that helps protect you against COVID-19 dis and misinformation. And also Harmony Square, created with the US State Department. And it's a very funny game. It's your mission, you're the bad guy, okay? The mission is to disrupt the peace and tranquility of the square, Harmony Square, by fomenting internal divisions, pitting residents against each other, and you have a few levels in this game. Each level corresponds to a specific mis and disinformation technique used by the Kremlin. And it's evaluated scientifically. It works. It reduces your susceptibility to fall for dis and misinformation techniques if you have been, in kind of way, inoculated. And it works for 3 months, so you can play regularly. And it's a kind of new tools we have. It's not a magical remedy. It doesn't solve everything, of course. We have also to consider intervention at a systemic level, the level of the platforms, but it's quite encouraging for combating this misinformation and improving our media education.
30 seconds for everyone.
Who owns the media? Who owns the media? What is the economic model? You know, in France, we are facing something unbelievable. The most important billionaires of France owns the media, apart from the public media. And they have an agenda. All of them.
30 seconds, Maxine. I'd come back to to transparency as an asset and to, of course, all this debate about media is important, but I think what we need is kind of democracy education that creates subjects that have critical minds.
Just a quick follow-up on that one, and invest in teachers and teacher education, because I mean, in Finland we can thank a lot of them. Next to that one, I would just like for the journalistic actors to keep ahead of the loop, so pool resources on that type of things. That will happen in Norway, that we are also always promoting as an example. 6 competing media houses, 2017, after the Trump victory, said that we need to do something together. We are too small alone, we can pool our efforts, and now they are building first like a fact-checking, then the verification, that is like a basic skill of journalism, and now they are going for the media literacy, the kind of a source criticism that is, of course, the forward. We have to know what the information is sourced of, and this, of course, immediately I would say also that we have to now position ourselves towards the AI, let's say with a mindset of curiosity. It's here, but we need to know that it's more like computational logics that it is actually artificial intelligence as such, and this, like how do we position to this type of new tool is very important, because we don't want people to become like stupid, because that's a huge risk of it.
20 seconds.
About, yes.
I just strongly recommend that all parents, when their children are past sort of like the bedtime stories age, they take time, 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, to consume news from whatever source and talk about it.
Thank you, panelists. Our audience, Institut Français, University of Helsinki, for this opening session of the European Dialogue in Helsinki. I hope this was informative for you, our discussion. We should have had 2 hours more, but let's continue this afternoon. Thank you very much.